Right now in 2026, most gun owners in America do not even know whether their state requires them to register their firearms. And if you are in a state that does require it, and you are not complying, you could be sitting on a criminal violation without even realizing it. But here is the flip side, and this is the part that should excite you. The legal landscape is shifting hard in favor of gun owners, and the details will surprise you. Look, before we get into all of this, I want to ask you something directly. Here's the thing that most people do not understand. Gun registration in the United States is not one single rule. It is a patchwork of federal law, state law, and local ordinances that varies dramatically depending on where you live. And in 2026, that patchwork is being pulled in two very different directions at the same time. Some states and cities are pushing hard to expand registration requirements. Others are doing the exact opposite, passing laws that explicitly ban their state governments from ever creating a gun registry at all. Understanding which category your state falls into is not optional. It is something every gun owner needs to know cold. So let us start at the federal level, because this is where most people are completely confused. The first thing you need to understand is this. There is no national gun registry in the United States, and that is not an accident. That is the law. Since 1986, the Firearm Owners Protection Act has explicitly prohibited the federal government from creating or maintaining a searchable database of gun owners or their firearms. That means when you walk out of a gun store with a legally purchased firearm, the federal government is not supposed to be tracking that weapon to your name in any permanent searchable registry. The ATF does retain certain records from gun dealers when those dealers go out of business. But there is active legislation in Congress right now, a bill called the No Retaining Every Gun in a Network Act, also known as Senate Bill 119 in the 119th Congress, that is pushing to further restrict how long the ATF can hold onto those records. This is real legislation currently moving through the system, and it matters for your privacy as a gun owner. The second thing you need to understand is what is happening at the state level, and this is where it gets really interesting. Only 2 jurisdictions in the entire country require you to register all of your firearms: Hawaii and Washington, D.C. In those places, if you own a gun and it is not registered, you are breaking the law. Full stop. A handful of other states require registration for specific types of firearms. California requires registration of so-called assault weapons. Maryland requires registration of assault pistols. New York requires registration of handguns and certain assault weapons. Minnesota and New Jersey have their own specific requirements. If you live in any of these states, you need to know exactly which of your firearms require registration and make sure you are compliant. Now, quick legal note right here. Everything I am covering in this video is educational information only. It is not legal advice. Gun laws are incredibly state-specific and in some cases, city-specific. If you have questions about your specific situation, please consult a licensed firearms attorney in your state. Do not guess, do not assume, get real legal guidance. But now here's the part that most people are not talking about. And this is where the tide is turning. If you are learning something new here, wait until you see my next video. I am covering exactly what to say, and what never to say, when a police officer asks you about your firearm during a traffic stop. Subscribe right now so you do not miss it the moment it drops. This is the kind of information that protects you in real life. The third thing you need to understand is that 16 states have passed laws that explicitly prohibit their state governments from maintaining any kind of gun registry at all. Let me say that again, because it is important. 16 states have laws on the books that literally ban the creation of a state gun registry. These are not states that simply have not gotten around to building one. These are states where it is illegal by statute for the government to even attempt to track gun ownership in a centralized database. This is a strong and growing trend across the country, and it reflects a deep commitment to Second Amendment rights at the state level. The fourth thing, and this is connected to those 16 states, is the constitutional carry movement. In 2026, 29 states now have what is called constitutional carry, or permitless carry. Let me explain what that means in plain terms. In those 29 states, if you are a law-abiding adult who can legally possess a firearm, you can carry that firearm concealed in public without first having to obtain a government permit. You do not have to apply. You do not have to pay a fee. You do not have to wait for approval. You just carry. That is a massive shift from where this country was just 15 years ago, when only a handful of states had this policy. The constitutional carry movement and the anti-registry movement are connected. Both come from the same principle, that law-abiding citizens should not have to ask the government for permission to exercise a constitutional right. The fifth thing is something the mainstream media is almost completely ignoring, and it is a very big deal. In February of 2026, the National Rifle Association filed its third lawsuit challenging the National Firearms Act. The National Firearms Act, or NFA, is the 1934 federal law that requires the registration and taxation of items like suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and machine guns. For decades, gun owners have had to pay a $200 tax and wait months or even years for approval just to legally own these items. The NRA's new lawsuits argue that the NFA's registration and restriction requirements violate the Second Amendment under the legal standard established by the Supreme Court in 2022 in the Bruin decision. This is not a long shot. This is serious litigation backed by serious legal resources, and the outcome could reshape the gun registration landscape in a fundamental way. The sixth thing is the Supreme Court itself. Right now, in early 2026, there are more Second Amendment cases pending before the U.S. Supreme Court than at any point in recent history. These cases involve challenges to the federal felon in possession ban, challenges to state bans on semi-automatic rifles, challenges to magazine capacity restrictions, and more. The court is looking at all of this through the lens of the Bruin Standard, which requires the government to justify gun restrictions by pointing to a historical tradition of similar restrictions in early American history. Here's a hypothetical example to illustrate why this matters. If a state passes a law requiring registration of a certain type of firearm, and the government cannot point to a similar registration requirement from the 1700s or early 1800s, that law may not survive a legal challenge under the current standard. The historical tradition test is giving gun owners a powerful new tool to fight registration requirements in court. Hey, quick check-in. Did you know that nearly 7 out of 10 people watching this right now are not subscribed to this channel? That means most of you are watching this video, getting real, accurate, up-to-date legal information, and then walking away without any guarantee that you will ever find this channel again. Do not do that. Join the community of responsible gun owners who get these updates first. Click that subscribe button right now. It is free, it takes 3 seconds, and it could genuinely keep you out of legal trouble. The seventh thing you need to know is how registration requirements actually work in practice in states that have them, because a lot of gun owners in those states think they understand the rules and they do not. Here is a hypothetical example to explain this clearly. Imagine you legally purchased a handgun in New York 3 years ago. You registered it as required. Then the law changes and a new category of firearm gets added to the registration requirement. If you acquire a firearm that now falls under that new requirement and you do not register it within the required window, you are now in violation of state law. The law does not care that you were compliant before. You are only as legal as your most recent compliance. This is why staying current on your state's specific rules is not optional. It is ongoing. States that have registration requirements frequently update what those requirements cover, what the deadlines are, and what the penalties for noncompliance look like. The eighth thing is about something called the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and this is one of the most fascinating developments in gun law right now. Missouri passed one of the most aggressive versions of this law, and in 2026, the state legislature is working on an updated version after a federal court struck down parts of the original. The idea behind these laws is straightforward. They say that state and local law enforcement in that state will not help enforce federal gun laws that the state believes violate the Second Amendment. Now, the courts have pushed back on some of these provisions, but the trend of states asserting their authority on gun rights is very real and very active. And it matters to you because it affects how gun laws are actually enforced on the ground where you live. The ninth thing is what happens when a state with a registration requirement comes after people who are not in compliance. This is the part that most gun owners in high-restriction states are not thinking about. If you live in a state like New York or California and you have a firearm that falls under a registration requirement and you did not register it, you are not just facing a fine. Depending on the specific violation and your state's laws, you could be looking at misdemeanor or even felony charges. And a felony conviction for a gun violation does not just mean prison time. It means you permanently lose your right to own any firearm for the rest of your life in every state in the country. That is not a small consequence. That is a life-changing one. And in many cases, people walk into that situation because they simply did not know the rule existed or had changed. The 10th and final thing is the most important, and it is the one I want you to carry with you after this video. The gun rights landscape in America in 2026 is moving. It is not static. Federal legislation is being proposed to further limit gun registration. 16 states already prohibit gun registries by law. 29 states have constitutional carry. Multiple SCOTUS cases could reshape the rules dramatically in the coming months. The trend in much of the country is moving toward protecting your privacy as a gun owner and reducing the government's ability to track who owns what. But none of that helps you if you live in a state that still has active registration requirements and you are not in compliance right now, today. Before I close out, here is why this matters right this moment. The legal landscape is shifting fast, and courts are rewriting the rules in real time. My next video is going to break down the 5 SCOTUS gun cases you need to be watching in 2026, because the outcome of those cases will directly affect what you can legally own, how you can carry, and what registration requirements might actually survive a constitutional challenge. If you missed that video, you will be behind. Subscribe right now so that video hits your feed the moment it goes live. The next few months could change everything. So here's the bottom line on everything we just covered. Gun registration in America is not one uniform rule. It depends entirely on your state. Only Hawaii and Washington, D.C. require registration of all firearms. A handful of other states require registration of specific types. 16 states have laws that explicitly ban gun registries. And the legal trend in 2026 is moving strongly toward protecting gun owners' rights, with new legislation, new NRA lawsuits, and multiple Supreme Court cases all pushing in that direction. Do me a favor, before you click away. Share this video with one gun owner you know who needs this information. A friend, a family member, someone in your gun club, someone who just bought their first firearm. Because the most dangerous thing for a gun owner is not the law itself. It is not knowing what the law says. You just watched this video. You are no longer in the dark. And remember, this video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Gun laws vary by state, by city, and by the specific type of firearm you own. Always consult a licensed attorney in your state for guidance that applies to your specific situation. Stay safe, stay legal, and stay informed. I will see you in the next one.